overdoses.
Was shortly before Hillary Clinton's FBI interview about the mishandling of classified information. And the report cites then Attorney General Loretta Lynch for having poor judgment in terms of taking the meeting. It's described as unplanned, taking that meeting and then allowing the conversation to go on as long as it did. Both Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton were interviewed as part of the Inspector General's investigation. And based on what I've read so far, their account is that it was unplanned. On the issue of insubordination, at least what I've seen so far, it goes specifically to Director Comey's decision to go outside his authorities and to have that public statement in early July where he announced the findings of the investigation that indeed there was classified information that was on the Clinton emails.
I just want to remind people, if we could just play that. I believe that is call for 20. Control room, can you play that? Number 20 is Comey on July 5th, 2016. They don't have it? Let me just read it to you, Catherine. It says, although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. I've seen some reports on Twitter, and you've read the report, so let me ask you here. Is there a finding in this report that a foreign actor was actually able to access Hillary Clinton's emails?
We were able to obtain a document earlier today. This was an email that was sent in May of 2016 among a small group of senior FBI officials, including this FBI agent Peter Strzok, who was number 2 in the counterintelligence division. I think you need to pay close attention to the language because he says that they know foreign actors got access to some of the Clinton emails by compromising the accounts of her staff. What he does not say is that the compromise was on the server itself. But he does say that there were compromises of ancillary email accounts. But that's significant because he states in the email there was at least one email that was classified at the secret level, and that is one of the highest levels of classification, as you know. Just back to the issue of insubordination, I think it's worth reading from the Inspector General's report again. It states, pardon me, I'm just going to go back here.
No problem.
We found that it was extraordinary and insubordinate for Comey to conceal his intentions from his superiors, the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, for the admitted purpose of preventing them from telling him not to make the statement and to instruct his subordinates in the FBI to do the same. Comey waited until the morning of that press conference to inform Lynch and Yates of his plans to hold one without them, and he did so only after notifying the press. As a result, Lynch's office learned about Comey's plans via press inquiries rather than from Comey himself. Moreover, when Comey spoke with Lynch, he did not tell her what he intended to say in his statement. So they do use the word insubordination, insubordinate, and also in the current FBI Director Christopher Wray's response to the report, he cites a number of recommendations, about 8 recommendations that the Bureau is taking on board, and he does specifically use this term insubordination in his discussion of his predecessor, Director Comey's actions at that time, Dana.
All right. Catherine Herridge, if you'll stick around, we'll come back to you, and I know we're going to see you later on the 5 as well. We appreciate all you've done in the last several months, but certainly today you've been working your tail off. We will come back to you in just a few minutes. All right. Let's bring in Bob Driscoll. He's former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush, and Shelby Holliday. She's senior video reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Shelby, let me start with you. You've been covering this story for a long time.
In an obstruction of justice case, the president has gone on Twitter and has spoken at length about Comey's what he says is corrupt intent and Comey's credibility. So in this sense, while the IG report does fault Comey's decisions and his actions, it actually, legal experts say, does not really dent his credibility because it does not find that he lied. It doesn't find that he misled the public. It also says it found that there was no evidence. There's no evidence here to support the theory that the FBI was against Trump. While where there are those really damning text messages from people below James Comey, the report says those political views in text messages did not influence the investigation. And at the end of the day here, when you look back to 2016, James Comey talked at length about Hillary Clinton's investigation. He did not, on the record, confirm that there was an investigation into the President Trump's campaign. And so I think at the end of the day, Comey's credibility was something everybody was watching for, and it does not seem like that is something that was truly dented by this report.
Bob, you worked at the Department of Justice. This must be quite extraordinary for you to see. I mean, I worked at the Justice Department years ago in 2001 and 2002. I've never seen any sort of report like this that is quite damning for the entire institution. Your thoughts?
It is damning, and it's frankly depressing as a former DOJ employee. I mean, those Strzok and Page texts are kind of breathtaking.
Let me pull those up one more time, Bob, in case people have joined us late, because this is the bombshell that's coming out of this report. There's this question of Strzok and Page. They work at the FBI, they work under Comey, and they were having an affair. And they're actually texting each other about the investigation, about the campaigns, while they're on their government phones and while they're working on these cases. Can we pull up those that text message just one more time for everyone to see? Do we have them? Here we go, right here. It's Lisa Page asking in August of 2016.
Right.
Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? And Peter Strzok says, no, he won't. We'll stop it. And Bob, a lot of people are going to focus on that. Like, what does it mean? We'll stop it. Well, obviously, President Trump wins the election. We all know how that story particularly ended. But there is a question about then, did Strzok suggest the Russia investigation in order to hurt President Trump?
Right, and that's what's so sad about it is, it really does. I think the report's correct that it casts a pall over the entire investigation, and frankly over both. I mean, it's important to remember Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are not kind of line FBI agents talking around a water cooler. Strzok was the #2 in the counterintelligence unit of the FBI. I mean, he's a very senior FBI agent. He signed off, I think, on the opening of the Russia investigation. So this is somebody very far up the chain. This is not a line person. Not that it would be any better, but you might think it might not have any influence. And I think Catherine Herridge brought up a great point, which is that this is not dealing with the Russia investigation at all. This is all just dealing with the Hillary Clinton investigation. And unfortunately, I mean, I think that people for the department, the IG can conclude that there's no documentary evidence that political bias affected decision making, but it's kind of hard not to draw a conclusion if you look at the way the Clinton investigation was handled and then compare it to the Russia investigation, which isn't part of this report. It's kind of hard to ignore the glaring differences in terms of, on one side, you've got people, voluntary statements are given, witnesses are immunized, lawyers are allowed to be in who are also witnesses. It's all treated with kid gloves. And then on the Russia side, with the same investigators, you've got people's doors being knocked down, search warrants, and a much more aggressive approach. And I think that unfortunately, I hate to see these things politicized, but I think it's unavoidable. I mean, there's really no other conclusion you can draw from that text message other than that Strzok had a real problem with Trump and was trying to do something about it through his official role at the FBI. And I think that's terrible.
Terrible, inappropriate. We talk a lot, Shelby, about no one is above the law. That includes actually the people who are supposed to be carrying out the law for the United States. What do you hear, if anything, from Comey's camp in the lead up to this investigation by the IG being released?
Well, I was speaking to somebody at the FBI the other day, and they recalled a time during 2016 where Comey just looked at some people around him and said, this is going to be awkward either way. You have two candidates who have investigations into either the candidate or the candidate's campaign. He knew it would be awkward. He made decisions. He, on his book tour, has really fallen on the sword for some of those decisions and admitted mistakes that people didn't quite frankly think he would admit. That doesn't change anything that happened in 2016. And in fact, we focus so much on how President Trump will react because he's the president. He's very vocal on Twitter. But Hillary's camp today feels also very frustrated and very angry about this report. They feel that Comey's actions did impact
really hurt her. Yeah, and we're going to have later on in this program.
And they feel vindicated by this report, but in a terrible way.
They do. And Sarah Sanders is set to brief at the bottom of the hour, and we'll bring that to you live, of course, but if she's running a little late, Marianne Marsh, who's a Democratic strategist, knows the Clintons well. She'll be here to talk about that point of view. But in the meantime, Bob, I wanted you to listen to this sound from Jim Comey. It's call for number number 21 up there in the control room. This is where James Comey is talking about how he felt about these accusations that perhaps his decisions, and now we know that the IG is calling them insubordination, might have actually influenced the election in some way. Do we have that? Go ahead.
Look, this was terrible. It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election. But honestly, it wouldn't change the decision. Everybody who disagrees with me has to come back to October 28th with me and stare at this and tell me what you would do. Would you speak or would you conceal? And I could be wrong, but we honestly made a decision between those two choices that even in hindsight, and this has been one of the world's most painful experiences, I would make the same decision.
I hear him on that, right? We're humans, we make judgment calls, and he's saying that he would have made the same decision looking back. But is there any practical effect or impact by an IG saying that there was insubordination, no political bias? It seems to me this might be like a bad report, but are there any practical consequences that comes out of it?
I mean, I think just to address his statement, I mean, I think where former Director Comey went off the rails is, in essence, you can see in that statement, he's playing God as though it's all in his control as to what happens. And I think that if you've ever been a political appointee, everyone's been in a position where no matter what you do, you're going to tick somebody off. But that's when it's the most important to follow the rules and rely on the procedures and rules that are in place, because then at least you have that, even though you're going to take heat from one side or the other. And so I think the whole point of following the rules is to insulate yourself from having to make the political calculation that he admits to having made. I mean, essentially conceding that he's making the political calculation. So I think that, he really kind of, unfortunately for him, the bloom has kind of come off his rose a bit in the past year. He was kind of viewed as Mr. Integrity and Mr. Stand-Up guy, and now I think through his book tour and other things, and I think it's fair that, I mean, I can see why the Clinton camp is upset as well, that the original sin in this matter was that first statement where he cleared Clinton from being indicted, and then essentially went on to light her on fire for the next 20 minutes, talking about all the evidence that he had that wasn't going to result in an indictment. So, I mean, all of this is bad for him, and I think it's reputationally damaging.
Although I'm just going to correct one thing. I actually think in all of this, the original sin is actually not being addressed, which is the reason we have this investigation in the first place into Clinton's emails is because she had decided to set up a separate email system and a separate server. I mean, that's actually the original sin if we dig into it. That's why we've had all of these investigations in the first place. All right, Bob Driscoll and Shelby Holliday, thank you for joining me, and we are going to come back to you a little bit later if we get more news. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And what do we have next here? Oh, we have guests. All right, we have A.B. Stoddard and we have Ron Hosko. Thank you so much for being here. Ron Hosko is the former director of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. A.B. Stoddard, of course, you know her. She's on Fox News a lot. She's associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics. Sure. Ron, let me just maybe ask you the same type of question that I started with Bob Driscoll, who had worked at the Justice Department for a long time. And one of those who had worked there, we have affection and affinity and respect for that institution, but it's kind of a dark day for the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Dana, if that's for me, someone was chatting in my ear, but it is a dark day for the FBI. There's been a cloud hanging over the organization, the building, for 2 years now. I think that hopefully this Inspector General's report goes some step forward into saying what was true, what is fact-based, and what has been made up over the last 18 months or 2 years, and the clouds for the FBI workforce and their name and the integrity of the organization starts to clear.
A.B., let me read to you a statement from Congressman Nadler of New York. He's a Democrat who says that the stark conclusion we draw after reviewing this report is that the FBI's actions helped Donald Trump become president. As we warned before the election, Director Comey had a double standard. He spoke publicly about the Clinton investigation while keeping secret from the American people the investigation of Donald Trump and Russia. What are you hearing from Democrats today? Are they echoing that frustration?
Yeah, they've made it clear since Hillary Clinton lost, that they blame Comey for the measurable effect that his late release of that letter on October 28th and then his closing up of that new probe a few days later had on her final days and weeks of her campaign. And they really perceived it to be fatal and costing her the election. So you're going to see, as Shelby said in the previous segment, both sides come up with things in this report that they believe argues for their narrative. I do think, as someone myself who spent a lot of time studying up on the Hillary Clinton email story at the time, you and I had conversations about this in 2015, 2016. I believe what the secretary did at the time with her server was deliberate and illegal. I think in this report, many of us were expecting to see whether or not there was a trail of evidence showing that the FBI, in their conduct, whether it was insubordinate or rogue or unprecedented, as Comey's was, or otherwise, showing animus like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, whether it amounted to a successful protection of Mrs. Clinton. And the report does not show that. It does not show that the Russia investigation was started on false or not credible premises. And it has a net effect in the end. James Comey's unprecedented behavior, which was, I guess, insubordinate, it still had a net effect, as Congressman Nadler points out, of revealing an investigation into Mrs. Clinton and protecting an investigation, hiding one, into then candidate Donald Trump. And so it's really hard to argue, having looked at this report, that somehow, despite the fact that you have agents like Peter Strzok.
Yeah. If I could have you hold, Senator Lindsey Graham is speaking. We're going to listen in live here.
Okay.
The FBI, the people in charge of the Clinton investigation, were they really in the tank or not? And we'll see what the conclusions are. And I will challenge Mr. Horowitz to make sure that his conclusion that they weren't in the tank makes sense. Time will tell.
Thanks,
All right, AB and Ron, that was Lindsey Graham just making a couple of quick statements there on that. AB, I hear what you're saying, and Ron, I want to ask you something else, which is about this IG report and insubordination. We talked about there are processes in place, and that's what helps keep you from getting into this kind of trouble. James Comey decided to take this upon himself and try. I guess he thought that he was doing the right thing. That's what he said in May of 2017. We'll see if that holds. I assume that he probably will continue to defend himself. Do you think at the Justice Department and the FBI, do they need new protocols, or do they just need to ensure that the protocols they have are followed?
You know, Dana, I think the protocols are solid. This was extraordinary. And for me, quite clearly, there was a breakdown of trust at the highest levels of DOJ and the FBI. Jim Comey has, in part, explained that. Going back to the tarmac meeting, there were hints that there was something else that the FBI had that raised, in his mind, doubt about whether a judgment by the DOJ could be trusted. And quite clearly, he felt like he might acquit the investigation on that basis. But I think the protocols are strong. What you need is confidence in each other and trust in each other and communication between each other. And quite clearly, that communication and trust was gone here, and I think there's probably plenty of blame on that to be spread around.
And all Americans need to have trust in their FBI and in their Justice Department, or else the country doesn't work. All right, Ron Hosko and A.B. Stoddard, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Here.
There's been swift and strong reaction in the halls of Congress as lawmakers learn the stunning details of a scathing report on the Clinton email investigation that we've been talking about. And our own Peter Doocy is live on Capitol Hill. You've talked to a couple of lawmakers. Peter, what are their, I can imagine their general sense, but you tell me, give me the color.
Dana, the general sense right now, I've got Congressman Mike Johnson here, Republican from Louisiana. He is one of the members who just picked up the 500-page hard copy IG report, and we were flipping through it. You've had the highlighter out and the underlining pen. So as much as you've been able to read in the 20 minutes since you've had the 500 pages, what stands out to you?
There really are some explosive allegations in here. The evidence is pointing to a clear political bias. There's evidence that Peter Strzok, for example, who was the chief investigator of the Clinton email scandal, that he was communicating with his paramour, Lisa Page, and he said at one point, answering her question, could Trump really be the president? He said, no, we'll stop it. There's evidence here that they were going to use official action of the FBI to intercede and intervene in a presidential election. This is very very explosive stuff, Peter.
And you're on the Judiciary Committee, so you've been following each incremental detail over the last couple of months of this investigation. How much does this move the ball forward?
We have yet to digest all of it. Obviously, we got it 20 minutes ago, and it's over 3 inches thick. But we've been doing hearings in oversight. The Oversight Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, have been doing hearings since last October. We've interviewed a number of high-profile witnesses at the FBI. We've reviewed thousands of pages of documents. We had lots of questions. I think many of the questions are being answered here. They're being affirmed that what our suspicions were are correct, and that is that there was a bias at the FBI. That's a real problem. At the end of the day, this is about the rule of law and the people's faith in our institutions. There cannot be a different standard for the Clintons or anyone else. The law has to be equal, and it has to be blind.
Some of your Democratic colleagues in the House are already saying, we have looked through the report and think it actually helped President Trump and hurt Hillary Clinton.
Look, I'm a constitutional law attorney. I'm going to tell you that none of that is relevant. The political outcome is not the question here. The question is, was the law faithfully executed? Was it interpreted? Was it applied the right way? That's the explosive thing here. The political outcome is a totally different analysis. What we're looking to see is, was the law violated? It looks to us, according to this inspection, that it really was, and that's a real problem.
All right, Congressman Mike Johnson, I know that you've got a couple inches of paper to read. Dana, we will continue to try to round up some congressional reaction, and we'll bring it back to you in the next couple minutes.
All right, Peter, thank you, and thank you to the Congressman. We appreciate that quick response. So the White House briefing is about to get underway any minute. I would not want to miss that one. As former FBI Director James Comey comes under fire for his handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. More coverage in a moment.
All right, and you can see this is the news briefing room there at the White House. We are just moments away from Sarah Huckabee Sanders getting to the podium there. This should be a must-watch event there, no doubt. That is coming up soon. More news now, coming up next, everyone. For those of you watching, here is the 500-page report. They are slowly scrolling through that right there. We'll clip it on our YouTube page there for you. And welcome back, everyone, here to News Now. Just moments away from the White House news briefing. This just moments after the DOJ report there on the special investigation into Hillary Clinton email probe was released. All 547 pages there. You can see that's scrolling through right now. That is a heavy book there, no doubt, and it's going to be one of the biggest topics, no doubt, at the White House briefing, and that should be happening any moment now. Is scheduled for the bottom of the hour, which we're at right now, 11:30 Arizona time. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here. Welcome back to News Now.